to deal with the budget. And of course, you have followed the very interesting comments that have come on the back of the Asempa budget, sowing the seeds for growth and jobs. The minister definitely says that we have a challenge economy. Our debt stock is 73% of GDP. Kuku, what does that mean? What are the implications of that for my kenke and fish? If the debt stock is 73% of GDP.
Well, the implication is that you are also paying interest payments, because as your debt stock rises, it rises with the interest, not the money itself. The interest you pay, the debt servicing rises with it. And in 2016, whilst we're talking about a debt stock of 73 billion, you're also looking at interest payment in that year of about 11 billion. And that is money we take, money that should have gone into the provision of government services, goes into paying these interest, goes into this kind of debt servicing. So that is the first point. Okay. But also, it is not for nothing that in our private lives, you don't go just borrow, because it makes your financials look very weak. And whenever you have to borrow, you borrow at a very high price. So if you ask me what it means for the ordinary person, what it means is that money that should go into buying chalk for basic schools, money that should go to help procure crude oil to power generators and to deal with the energy sector. I mean, money that government should have for other purposes would go to pay interest.
We'll deal with key aspects of the budget statement, but I want us to deal briefly with the question of the debt, because that is the basis upon which, you know, the entire statement was presented and the projections were made. We also have a 7 billion CD, you know, debt to pay. 7 billion CDs outstanding. Yes, commitments to pay. The question is, what does that mean for the NPPs or government's, you know, lofty campaign programs? Particularly, you talk about the interest payments, which we understand is taking up to 42% of tax revenue.
Yeah, now it's going up to 14 billion in 2017.
Okay. So what does that mean? That you are paying this, you are supposed to pay this amount of 7 billion, and this is how it is taking us to pay only for interest. What does that mean for all the major programs that you intend to undertake?
Well, what it means is that you are unable to move as quickly as you would have loved to with your own programs, and you have to come back and deal with some of the liabilities that you have inherited. And that is why we are committing about 6 billion into amortization. You're having to audit. We intend to audit the outstanding commitments that have been brought to us. We audit them, but we have even made provision to also pay off some of them, something in the neighborhood of 3 billion. So all it means is that, yeah, you would have loved to move as quickly as you can, but you can't do that because government is a continuum, and once you inherit these liabilities, you need to deal with them. And in our case, we are also in a program with the IMF that will not allow you to, in any case, you even don't want to do it because it hurts your own economy. When you have all these arrears that are not treated in the economy, it comes back to hurt the economy. So the implication for us as a new government is that, well, you cannot move as quickly as you would have loved to. You need to deal with this.
All right. Now, Doc, the claim is that, and when I refer to how that affects my KK and fish, is because I want to, you guys to assist us, because these things are really difficult to understand, to assist us so that everybody who is watching and listening can make a common sense, you know, understanding of what is going on. So the debt stock, 73% of GDP, and as indicated, 42% of tax revenue is being used to pay for only the interest on them. But the NDC government says, you talk about these things and present a challenge economy. But these debts you're talking about and the 7 billion you are supposed to service and all of that, they are manifested in the grand school and hospital edifices, the interchanges, and the massive road infrastructure that this government won't have to do anymore. And these also stand to propel economic development. So what are we talking about, really?
Well, Samson, thank you. It's interesting, but first of all, you want to look at whatever the actions of government, what is the outcome? Looking at your macroeconomic environment, because in any economy, what you have to be able to achieve is to have a stable macroeconomic environment. You can talk about infrastructure, you can talk about schools and all of that. If you have very unstable macroeconomic environment, it can stifle any further growth that you have to record, because it creates a whole sort of uncertainties, and investors are often not attracted, or they are likely to leave the economy, and so your growth begin to decline, and unemployment and others continue to rise. And so whatever that you are doing, you have to be mindful of the impact, first of all, on your macroeconomic indicators. Now we're looking at this debt situation. First, you need to ask yourself, how did the debt levels come to 73-point-something%? It's all because you spend more than your revenue. At the time where your revenue, you are recording shortfalls in your revenue to the tune of about 11.3% in terms of revenue, you are spending more, about 13% more than you have budgeted. Then you create a huge gap. So once that huge gap is created, which means that your revenue falls short of your expenditure, what then do you have to do? You have to force yourself to come to the open market to borrow. So you borrow to finance that gap. Now, in the process of borrowing to finance that gap, your debt stock increased. Now, what is the implication? The implication is that, one, you will be competing with the private sector for the limited resources, loanable resources that is available. And once that is happening, you are likely to push up interest rates. So it is not too surprising that in the midst of all this infrastructure, we still have very high interest rates, and in fact, one of the highest in West Africa. It's very high. That has tended to stifle private sector investment, because credit is not affordable anymore, and banks and others prefer to lend to government because that is a safe haven for them, and interest rates on government treasuries are often also very high. So in the process, your growth, your economic growth, will not be able to expand as is expected. You stifle growth, and once that happens, you are not able to create jobs. So you find out that your growth is not doing well. The private sector is not able to invest to actually employ more people. So you increase unemployment, and the hardship of the people, increases. So everybody begins to actually complain, because by your actions of over expenditure, you are also going to fuel inflation. And so prices begins to go up. And once prices begin to go up, you weaken your currency against other foreign currencies. And so you are also likely to record very high volatility in your foreign currency, foreign exchange rates. And all of that had very negative implication on the economy. So then it becomes counterproductive, because regardless, if you have all this fine infrastructure and businesses are not able to operate because of high cost of doing business, they become uncompetitive, so they are not able to export, to be able to bring in more revenue or foreign currency. So your cedi weakens, and you don't generate employment, and many firms begin to fold up or leave the country. And so it is not so much about doing the infrastructure, but you always have to be mindful the immediate impact of your actions so that you don't worsen the situation.
Okay.
And so that is what really happened.
I desire your reactions to be brief so that we can get to the other meats of the budget, because it's such a loaded thing to do this morning. Now, I don't know what the NDC has been about. The minister clearly was putting up figures, facts, and yet you have been, as in the NDC, have been all over the place saying this was deceptive and all of that. The question of the debt, the question of the amount is sent to service the interest only of the debt. I mean, this is very biting. You signed up to the IMF and you've broken all the major, performance indicators. They are telling the Ghanaians the truth. Why are you up in arms about that?
Well, and that is exactly where the problem lies. That is exactly the deception, and I'll explain why. First and foremost, let's read the Monetary Policy Committee's report for just November. And that Monetary Policy report, as of November, told us that Ghana's debt was $30.1 billion. And that constituted a debt to GDP of 71.9%. Just use a conservative end-year figure and assume that there are no economic activities in December. Okay, and use an end-year exchange rate of 4.3. You get what? You get 180 billion. Okay, if by the end of December our debt position is 122 billion, strike that as a percentage of even a November GDP, you get 67% of debt to GDP. So it just doesn't make sense. We don't know where the figures are coming from. The other challenge is also that Ghana budgeted to grow the economy up to a nominal of 160 billion Ghana cedis. Inflation has been on a downward trajectory, and you exceed, and that 160 billion was supposed to give a growth rate of 4%. Now we exceed that by 20 billion, and yet growth rate declines. Unless you show me a very spectacular decline in a particular sector of the economy, I can't see how I will exceed my GDP figures and not even achieve at a minimum my projected rates. So that already is a big challenge. That is the starting point. Fast forward, in 2017, we've been told that this economy is going to boom and to expand. What is the reality? You are moving from a GDP of 180 as of November to 200 billion. Just 20 billion addition. And yet your growth rate has more than doubled, almost doubled. How is that possible? What kind of economic theory is this? Now, in addition to all of this, your inflation that you're targeting is going to drop by just about 1% to 12% by the end of the year. And yet, you are registering these kinds of growth. It is just difficult to understand. If there's no deception, what is it? And the reality is that you are borrowing 13 billion Ghana cedis plus a disinvestment of 1.8 billion constituting divestiture. That in itself is a financing of about 14 billion plus additional revenues of 12 billion. That puts you in a region of 26 billion to generate growth of 20 billion. Straight away, you know something is not right. Something just doesn't add up. So that is a deception even in terms of the numbers that we are looking at. He says that Ghana's, the president, between the president and that of the minister, is only 9 days. And we expect that at the time the president is coming, he's coming with the facts. The president tells us that our service, our debt, interest cost and amortization is 14 billion. A few days later, the minister comes to say, no, it's 10.3 billion. Suddenly, about 4 billion disappears from our interest costs. Where did it go? And yet our expenditure, instead of coming down, is gone up from 50 billion reported by the president to 51 billion. It just doesn't add up. You simply are struggling to understand where these figures are coming from. The reality is, we are growing the economy only by 20 billion from this year's figures. from 2016 figures. That is a paltry close to 10 to 11% of additional value. And yet we are almost doubling the GDP, the growth rates. It is very, very difficult. But let's stick with the fact. Somebody will tell you that lower debts and you are stifling your macroeconomy and the rest. We have been told that our debt was very low pre-2008 up to 2008. Let's look at what the facts are. Read the annual report of the Bank of Ghana for 2008. Our primary balance, as of 2006, when we were still in the HIPIC program, stood at 4.2% negative. By 2007, just a year after exiting HIPIC, it worsened to 6.2% negative. And by 2008, 2 years after exiting HIPIC, including all the monies we got from divestiture, it worsened to 10.3%. We are dealing with a negative of 1.4% in 2016. For goodness sake, how will somebody say that investment in infrastructure is counterproductive? You have a decision to make, whether to eliminate the bottlenecks that impede your growth and development now, or to postpone that. And if you decide to do it now, there's a cost to pay for it. So you don't decide that you should have gotten it for free and not pay interest on it. But the reality is that the interest cost he's talking about is increasing to the figure he's quoting because we're adding 13 billion more to our debt stock. It doesn't show a sign of a group of people who in opposition insisted that we must reduce our debt. And today, all they have done is to indicate GDP figures that give a 6.5% GDP, debt to GDP growth, signaling a reduction. And yet the reality is the economy is not going to grow. The economy is only going to grow by 20 billion, and that 20 billion is financed by an additional 26 billion.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense.
Let's hear Dr. Said briefly. Yes, Doc.
I think let's have a dose of reality over here. Take away all the...
A dose of reality, I like that.
all the politics from it. The reality is that, you see why you are borrowing. It's not because of infrastructure. It's not because of the project we're talking about.
Really?
Indeed, let me tell you, if the borrowing is directed towards infrastructure, you'll be seeing it in GDP. Because building infrastructure directly impacts GDP before its later repercussive effects.
Interesting. He disagrees with you, but you go ahead, finish your point.
Secondly, if borrowing is for infrastructure, you're going to see it in investment expenditure in the budget. What are we seeing in the investment expenditure in the budget? It has been declining. Despite increasing borrowing, revenues coming in, you are investing lesser and lesser amount relative to GDP. So the truth is that the borrowing, the serious borrowing taking place is not because you want to build infrastructure.
But what?
That, I'm not saying no infrastructure is being built, but in relative terms, the infrastructure being built is not commensurate with the borrowing. You know why you are borrowing? The country is locked in a state that if you do not borrow, we can run it.
Explain that.
So much of the new borrowing is helping us to pay our debt. If you remember last year's budget, I was here with the previous finance minister, and I was arguing that 3 expenditure items, debt service expenditure, wages and salaries, and statutory transfers, have consumed all the revenue space and even exceeded that. So to be able to even meet these 3 expenditure items, you have to borrow. But then there's capital expenditure and others. What do? You have to borrow more, not because you want to build the economy, but because you want to be able to meet this expenditure item and be able to run the country. You need goods and services. Without that, how do you run the country? So the borrowing is definitely not because you want to build a country. You want to invest. Infrastructure is taking place, investment is taking place, but in relative terms, it's very low. It keeps on declining. That is the reality, the dose of reality we are in now.
Very interesting there. Did you want to give some reaction
Yes,
to that?
I wanted to say that
Because this is sort of a revelatory explanation that dwarfs the NDC's, major explanation that these borrowing have gone into these projects?
Let me explain this. One, the assumption that when you spend on infrastructure, you immediately might see a growth in economy is not true. The reason is, if I invest in infrastructure, especially social spending, the impact doesn't get felt immediately. If I spend on education, if I spend on healthcare, you don't immediately, there's a time lag within which you realize the benefits.
It's a component of GDP directly.
Let me finish, yes. And so when...
Because you have construction.
Let me make, yes, let me finish. Let me finish. You see, I'm building 2 points.
Okay, no. Dr. Smith, just hold on. I'll let you explain.
Yeah, I just want to build 2 points. You see, the second point is, when you register a growth in services or in construction, and you register a bigger negative growth in the industrial sector, caused by commodity prices that is affecting your oil production and your oil revenue, you won't see growth. So the issue is that don't just say that, because you need to investigate broadly what are the issues that have driven the low growth.
I have.
So let's start
because construction must increase,
your
you must see growth.
Or reaction to him on the question of the impact of infrastructure and GDP.
Well, I mean, we all know that infrastructure is a key driver for growth.
Okay.
It's an expansionary policy. Once you are spending and you are constructing, even if the returns, if it's self-liquidating and the returns are yet to, you are yet to get the returns. One, it feeds through the incomes that we are paying to people who are on the construction field.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. You haven't capital formation. You are investing in capital, and so it shows up in your industrial sector. So your construction begins to go up in that sense. So you definitely will see the effect immediately. So now we are talking about American GDP going to go up because of the Trump's thing of investing heavily in infrastructure. So infrastructure is a direct driver of growth. Now, IMF, if you read IMF and all those credit rating agencies report, they have often said that chunk of the borrowing had gone to consumption.
No, we'll come to that, but it's obvious. We'll be discussing that. No,
and it's so clear.
Of that, yes, I agree with
as
that.
Doc said, you look at the amount of money that have been borrowed over the last 5 years or so, and you compare that to the infrastructure that we're talking about, you realize that it doesn't commensurate.
But
it's significant,
But
do
you agree that the industrial sector has registered negative, not because of infrastructure, but
let's see if Honorable Koku-Kwate also agrees with Dr. Said and also Dr. Sayasibe. Yes, do you agree with the point that they are making that suggests that the NDC has been misleading all of us?
Not like misleading.
To be honest, I have lost appetite. I've lost appetite for this our economic management and versus their economic management.
Okay.
I mean, I sat through this budget preparation, and the challenges confronting us as a country, we don't have the luxury to be doing this kind of, you did this, we did this. But it is important we establish the basics right so that we know how together we can build going forward. Let me start from just 2012. Capital expenditure as a percentage of GDP. In 2012, it was 6.7. In 2013, it dropped to 5.1. In 2014, it went up to 5.4. In 2015, it dropped to 5%. In 2016, it dropped to 4.6.
2017, continue.
So 2017, we have
what have you budgeted?
Oh,
it dropped to 3.6.
Yeah, it is even going to
3.6. So you say don't stop there.
Please.
That is
No,
true.
you are not being fair.
Yeah, that is
Go
true.
up to 2017. Let's see whether you are going there.
Okay.
It's going down further.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
do that.
Please, if you can, let me. I even have not completed 2017. I can do that, but
No, it's already there in the budget.
I'm
It's in
coming.
this budget.
Projection.
3.6.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
In 2016, the capital expenditure budget was 6 billion. But in the end, the government spent almost 8 billion, even though most of it was arrears. That is why, if you want to do an honest analysis,
Okay.
please. If you want to, it's there. You can check.
And this by 7.6. That's what I know.
What? But 7.6.
Don't be rounding Africa. 400 million is a lot. 400 million is a lot of money.
You budgeted.
That's understood.
It's your own document.
It's okay. You budgeted 6 point something billion. You ended up with 7 point. You say 6, eh?
Yeah.
8.
7.6. Yeah.
7.6. I don't go. The point I'm making is not even about these figures. The point I'm making is that you can budget one thing, you end up with another thing. That is why if we want to make an honest analysis, let's do with the actuals we know. I'm not being we versus you.
No.
I'm only establishing.
But you've gone back to 2012, so let's come all the way to 2017.
2017, we have not spent on capital.
But you budgeted. You want to achieve them.
What is this?
Okay, go ahead.
If you want me, we can use
stop.
budgets. If you want me to go back,
No.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Please don't interrupt
if
me
we
again.
have to go back and use budget figures, we can do that across the years. We're using actuals. 2017 hasn't happened.
Keep to your thoughts.
So the point I'm making is that if you look at this trend, and let me even agree with him, let's assume that we are not lucky and we end up 2017 with a much lower capital expenditure to GDP. What does that tell us as a country? That we are heading in the wrong direction. That is what that tells us.
Okay.
And the reason we are here is that traditionally our expenditures, our everyday expenditures, are getting, the gap between our expenditures and our incomes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. The question we should ask ourselves as a country is that, do we want to go on like this? And I want, at least we can agree that this trend is bad, then the debate then can be reduced to who has a better strategy to turn it around. But when we deny that if there's nothing wrong, then I don't know what we'll be doing, because going forward, it means things can only get worse. What I would say in respect of the things we've been hearing is that we are clear in our minds that both the structure of our expenditure profile, the way our expenditures are oriented, have contributed to this. Of course, I have no doubt, I'm very clear in my mind that the wastage and the corruption have had impact on the way public finances have run. What this budget is seeking to do is first to deal with the liabilities that we have inherited, to correct the opportunities for wastage and the stealing and the corruption, not necessarily under the NDC administration, but the kind of things you see in the Auditor General's report anytime you pick it up. That's what this budget is seeking to do, to deal with those matters. But also, we have taken steps going forward to deliver on some of the commitments that we made to the people of this country. Because look, we have sat down and the thinking was, well, you can decide to do very little, and whatever money you get this year, let's use it to settle all the liabilities we inherited. But it was also considered that, look, people might not understand you. They would say, well, we don't care, you made the promises. So what we have tried to do is a balance between the two, to deliver on some of the commitments and also to deal with some of the liabilities. I think it's a good budget. We invite Ghanaians to back us. If our strategies work as we think they will, it will be good for this country.
Right, thank you very much. Now, let's go to listen to the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, who did a couple of things in the House, almost turned the House of Parliament into a synagogue of worshippers, where he spoke about the parable of sowing seeds that will germinate and grow, and also about the miracle of feeding with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Let's hear him on how they're going to fund the one district, one factory, 1 million per constituency, and then we'll come back to ask the questions. If they are claiming that this economy is as challenged as it is, where are they getting all of that money?
Government has decided, has pledged, to review these taxes to provide relief for businesses. The following one district, one factory implementation, of which will commence this year, will be closely intertwined with our National Industrialization Revitalization Program. Is designed as a comprehensive program for rural industrialization, driven by the private sector and involving the setting up of at least 1 medium to large-scale factory in each of the administrative districts of our country. It is aimed at creating massive youth employment, especially in rural and peri-urban communities, add value to the natural resources of each district, ensure even and spatial spread of industries to stimulate economic growth in all parts of the country, enhance the production of local substitutes for imported goods, and promote exports and increase foreign exchange earnings. It has the potential, Mr. Speaker, of transforming the industrial landscape of Ghana and will contribute significantly to the socio-economic development agenda of the country. We estimate that over 350,000 direct and indirect jobs will be created from all parts of the country as a result of the implementation of this program. The Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program, IPEP, will be our main vehicle for tackling these challenges. The IPEP is designed to direct our capital expenditure towards local, constituency-level, specific infrastructure and economic development priorities, with particular emphasis on rural and developed and deprived communities. Mr. Speaker, under IPEP, every one of our 275 constituencies will be, as I stated, allocated the equivalent of $1 million US annually. This, Mr. Speaker, this will be the equivalent of 4.39 million Ghana cedis annually. It is expected that the projects selected under standardized guidelines will fall in the following categories: 1 district, 1 factory, 1 village, 1 dam, small business development, agricultural inputs, including equipment, water for all projects, and sanitation projects.
So the question your critics raise is that where are you going to get the money to fund these expensive programs when you suggest that the economy, is what you describe it to be?
What we have done in this budget is to list all the commitments we have made and the expenditures that come with them. We've listed them, we've costed them, and we know that they come up to about 54 billion Ghana cedis. So we've indicated that in the budget.
The total expenditure is going to be 58.1 billion.
Areas. Including areas.
Okay.
Including areas, okay. And then we have also looked at the resource envelope. The money we can get from taxation, the money we can get from non-tax revenue, the money we can get from petroleum revenue and all that. We have accounted for the money that we would borrow. We've accounted for grant. And we are convinced clearly in our minds that the resource envelope would finance our commitments in the budget. That is what the budget is. So there's a question of where are you going to find this money? You see, a budget statement is not just a list of the things you will do. It's also an indication of your projected revenues. Our projections even are conservative because it is part of the culture of this government that we want to maintain a high level of credibility. We want our budget statements to be credible so that when we put budgets down, development partners, everybody knows that this government, what they've written is true. So our projections, even on the revenue side, are conservative. But even with that, all the beautiful things that the minister mentioned, the tax cuts, we are abolishing VAT on financial services.
We'll deal with the tax abolitions and reductions as a separate issue.
But even the commitments. Immediately after the budget, a lady that had completed a nursing training, but has the junior sister also going, called me and said, Honorable, what the minister said, do you really think he would do it? And I said, look, we promised this in our manifesto. We have indicated it in our budget statement. How will we not do it? And I could feel her excitement behind the phone. You see, this is the first time we've read a budget. And the people in Buete, in Obuasi, fitters, mechanics, because of the abolition of import duty on
Abose Kai magazine in
magazines.
Kumasi.
They are all
Wild jubilations.
because you see, what's going to happen going forward is that this thing about people being disengaged from politics, and when you're going to read national budget, they think it's not your business. If I'm in some corner doing my mechanics work, I'm a fitter doing some my mechanic work somewhere, why should I bother about a budget? Now henceforth that has changed. And when we say this change in government, it's not just a change from one political party to another, but a change in the way this country is run. This is what we mean. Now there's a burden on politicians. Each time you're going to read your budget, the citizen will be waiting to see what is in it for us. This connection between the governed and government is extremely exciting for me. We will do more of that as we move, and whatever the challenges, the determination in the team leading the economy and the country is so absolute. And I have heard suggestions about it's deceptive, it is not going to happen. It started from the manifesto days. When we put all those commitments in our manifesto, they said it's a lie, it will not happen. Somehow the people of Ghana believed us and gave us a resounding victory. Once we won, and you listen to the critics, what you heard was, we will see in their budget. We will see the budget. We will see whether the budget, because somehow people...
Particularly when the president appeared to give the State of the
Exactly,
Nation,
and
he said, wait for the budget.
We will wait for the budget. Why? Because this country, we have been doing things wrong for so long that many of us don't believe that things can turn around again. So when you promise good deals to people and proper management of the economy, people say, you will do it and let's see. The budget came, and the budget has vindicated us. And I'm happy people are happy. I stand here on behalf of government to promise that we will deliver on this.
Okay, but you are sitting, you're not standing.
I'm sitting here to promise that we would deliver. The
Right.
people of Abosokai, that we would deliver.
Okay, right. I'll take Dr. Said's take on how you're going to fund these grand projects, and whether or not the NDC is not right by saying you are out to deceive the people because you claim this is how the economy is challenged, there's no money, and yet you are going to find all this, humongous amounts of money to fund your project. But how exactly does it work? That we have an expenditure total of 58.1 billion, and we're looking at a total revenue of 44.9 billion. How does it work? But this show is brought to you by Bank of Africa. They announced the official opening of the new head office located on the first floor of Block A and B of the Octagon building close to the Mövenpick Hotel. The new ultra-modern head office branch complements the Bolga, Wa, Airport City, Opera Square, Teshi Nungwa, and Accra Central branches that were added to the bank in 2016. Visit any of the 26 branches of Bank of Africa nationwide to experience the excellent customer service in a comfortable, serene environment. For further directions and inquiries, you can contact Bank of Africa on 0302 249 690. Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN is also proud to be associated with associated with Newsfile for years now. Now, if you're looking for internet that gives you real internet experience, then you need MTN 4G. Everybody loves the internet for one thing or the other, whether it is for gaming, music, streaming movies, learning, staying in touch with friends and family, or for business. MTN 4G gives you a better internet experience. 4G, in fact, is life. So go on, get yourself a 4G device today and experience the power of MTN's ultra-fast and stable 4G network, the first mobile 4G network in Ghana. MTN, say hello to the future. MTN, it is everywhere you go. As a farmer, a landscaper, or gardener, what's been your bother or headache over the years? If it's about poor seasonal yields, if it's about post-harvest losses, this is the time to say no to all of that. ACAP compost fertilizer, that's an organic fertilizer made from pure organic materials. And it is good for all agricultural purposes. ACAP compost fertilizer is available in all leading agro-import dealers and distributors across the country. For inquiries, you can contact 026 40 781. 026 40 781. And they will attend to you with a smile. Dr. Saidbach, what do you say about the questions that are being asked?
Okay. Now, the question you asked is, where are they going to get all this money to fund it?
Right. Whilst they are crying about the current situation.
Two sources. The first one is very high expected revenue growth. And the second one is expenditure rebalancing, or rearrangement, if you want to put it so. In fact, the government is expecting revenue to grow at 33.5% over the 2016 outturn. Admittedly, this is a very huge expected revenue growth if you compare with history. For instance, since 2008, it is only in 2011 alone that we had revenue growth exceeding 33.5%. And of course, in 2011, we saw that what you call it, GDP grew by about 14%. So the government has a lot of work to do. And I agree with the MP sitting down here. GDP on nominal basis is projected to grow around 20.5%. And in fact, this projected GDP growth in 2017 is the lowest since 2007. The 20% growth in nominal GDP is the lowest, at least, it may be more than that, but I have data up to 2007. The lowest, at least up to 2007. But out of this relatively small GDP, the government wants to squeeze additional 33.5% out of it. So the government has a lot of work to do. But this is how they say they are going to do it. They say they are going to try to get this revenue, huge revenue projected growth, from efficiency in tax collection, which is very difficult to quantify right now. Expanding the tax net, which is also very difficult to quantify right now. If they are able to do this and raise the revenue of 33% increase up to 20.5% nominal GDP growth, then they have done very well. Very, very well. And they will have to be commended. So we are looking up to reality. Can they do this? They have promised that they can do that. Then
is this revenue or money they are going to generate by their own innovation and works, or relying on the foundations or the work that's been done by the predecessor government?
Not the foundation, because the foundation is telling us historically the growth pattern of revenue when you are getting this GDP growth. They are going to be innovative, they are telling us. If they could be that innovative and squeeze this revenue without hurting business, of course, they are also cutting taxes. And the tax cuts have also been, projected to reflect in the GDP growth. So that is not an issue. Efficiency in revenue collection, widening the tax net. Governments over governments have been making mention of this, but the reality is that they are finding it difficult to do. The present government says they are going to do it. If they can do it, very commendable. Then on the question of expenditure rebalancing, it is something that I highly commend the government, because we have been talking about rigidity in the system, particularly in regards to statutory funding, whereby monies are transferred to these agencies' funds. And at times they sit down, whereby the government needs the money at the center. The government says it's going to cap it. I think it is a positive thing for now. But then
I'm sure that the Honorable Adongo will raise some issues about capping.
Yeah. I met him last time and he was raising issues.
The statutory funds, particularly for SHS, free SHS and all of that. But we'll deal with that, yes. So conclude on.
You see. So to conclude, we were expecting at IFS that when you do this expenditure rebalancing, probably to be directed towards capital investment, which has been dwindling relative to GDP. But now, because of campaign promises, or maybe in their thinking, how they want to grow the economy in the future, they are going to direct this into free SHS, one district, one factory, and others, which on the face, they are not bad if they could be implemented well. But if they are unable to implement it well, capital expenditure is setting down. We need revamping. We can also directly grow the economy. So on expenditure rebalancing, fine, they have taken a very bold step. If they cannot succeed, if the other parties will come on board, then it is a good thing. But how they are going to use the money, I'm not saying it is a wrong thing, but that's not what I was expecting.
I see. You held a press conference yesterday and clearly, indicated that you just kept to your comments in Parliament and the placards that you waved about all of this being a 419 budget. We have heard Munakote suggest that it's hollow, it's a runaway from the reality. Can you explain why what they are seeking to do, they will not be able to do because of what they describe the current economic situation to be?
Well, the reality is that you can't find the kind of, you see, this budget achieved one key objective for government. That was public relations. That they did excellently well. But the reality, when you come to the reality, what are the figures? Are the figures supporting the kind of things they said they are going to do? First, let's look at revenue. I have indicated that in nominal terms, we are growing the economy by only 20 billion Ghana cedis. The additional revenue that we expect to generate is about 12 billion. Now, that is 60% of the additional growth. What is the Ghana's marginal tax rate? Straight away, you know something is fundamentally wrong. Wishes are no horses. Look, you can't grow an economy by 20 billion and expect to take 60% of that to finance the growth. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. The reality is that it doesn't work. Look, the second biggest problem is that all they are trying to do, and I'm happy you mentioned expanding the tax base, but I'm going to tell you that, unfortunately, they are just going to stand at the port and expect more imports into this country to generate revenue. 61% growth in trade taxes, international trade taxes, is expected. And I can understand why. Because by reducing the VAT on trading commodities, what you are simply saying is that the end price of that product to the consumer is going to come down. And that will encourage more imports to be able to take advantage of the increased purchasing that will happen. People will now be able to buy more because prices are going to go down. That is going to encourage more imports. In addition to that, you've eliminated a few other taxes at the port. That already is an incentive for import. So what you are trying to create is an import-dependent economy. And to use that purely for purposes of generating revenue to finance the budget. And about 7 billion is budgeted, which is about 61% growth in international trade taxes. I cannot imagine any country that says we want to pursue industrialization and yet take a policy decision that clearly is inconsistent with this. Because then what we are doing is that you rather are we collapsing Ghanaian industries because they can't compete. Now, at the end of the day, what are we doing? You are eliminating taxes on spare parts, but you are refusing to eliminate.
I said that we have set the taxes aside.
It's part of the structure of the revenue and expenditure and the kind of economy we are trying to grow.
Okay.
You are reducing taxes on spare parts. Meanwhile, the biggest side of your real sector, which is the manufacturing sector, is crying for you to reduce taxes on raw materials. You don't do that. So you are rather encouraging people to import, but you are not supporting those that will produce in Ghana. Technically, what you are doing is that you are exporting labor. You are exporting jobs to other countries. That is the first point. So there's a serious policy non-alignment that you cannot understand the objective of this budget. The other challenge, even with this budget, is the fact that you are talking about $100 million for goodness sake for one district, one factory. And you are saying the private sector will lead this. The private sector doesn't just move its funds to Bunkrugu Yoyo because you said so. You have to give a signaling. You have to provide some impetus, some stimulation in the budget to encourage me not to site my factory in Accra, but I'll move it to Bunkrugu Yoyo. This budget is very silent in signaling the private sector where they should move their investment. So at the end of the day, you are budgeting for $100 million, and that is the grand industrialization. That is deception. And we cannot see in this budget any signaling to the private sector to move to the hinterlands and invest in factories. So technically, money will go where it will get its returns, unless you directly signal and give the direction through incentives and impetus for them to go there. We haven't seen that in this budget. So you see the policies are not aligned. Clearly, these are defeatist policies. That is why when we say
you mean you don't have the slightest indication that the 1 million per constituency, for example, part of it will be used, as we understand, for some of the preparatory groundworks to enable some of these things?
The issue is, in this budget, you expect some, and yeah, we are not talking SMEs. They are talking medium to large scale enterprise. Medium to large. You know what that means? Just a medium. You know the capital requirement for a business that is described as a medium? And you want me to just go to Bunkrugu Yoyo and do that because you said so? What have you done to encourage me to go there? What have you set in this budget that will signal to me that I should go there? So the private sector will not just go there because government says so. That is the first
We
point.
understand people are already flooding in the GIPC.
Listen. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, they have to establish a business case. That is the point. You see, for GIPC and people coming to register interest, it's been happening every year. But at the end of the day, how many of them really get to establish? When they now go down to do the business case and to do the feasibility and to do the analysis and to be able to look at how they will get back their money, they disappear. They don't invest. So what I'm trying to say is that that is the biggest challenge of this budget. But let's face the reality. In the end, you are going to finance a budget with 12 billion, which constitutes 60% of additional growth. Very unrealistic. 61% growth in international trade that is going to create and deepen the Gadgetsburg economy that they talked about. In terms of creating the infrastructure base, this budget rather reduces the capital investment from 7.6 to 7.1. 500 million more. If you consider that we are going to disinvest 1.8 billion from divestiture process, you expect that about 2.4 billion, 2.3 billion that should have gone to capital expenditure is going into consumption. Now, the other issue is, if you say free SHS, what were we promised? Was it progressively free education? The progressively free education is one they are now implementing. Because if you take only first years, what happens to the second and third? Progressive. So another time we'll take another time. So you are progressively making it free. I think that is what they said Ghanaians don't like. And in the end, you are now hiding behind to create another fund and ask the very parents that cannot pay the school fees to find a way to contribute into that fund to fund secondary education. Serious contradiction. But as to expenditure rebasing, my biggest challenge is that you don't rob Peter to pay Peter. Expenditure rebalance. You can't rob Peter to pay Peter. Look, I used to get a lot of money from the GET Fund. Now it's been capped. I'm not going to get all the funding from GET Fund at my district. I used to get a lot of money from Common Fund. Now it's been capped. I'm not going to get all of it. But in another sense, it will still come to me anyway in another form. We're talking about increasing the resource envelope to the communities.
A government should have priorities.
What are the priorities?
That's the priority of the government.
Yes, I agree. But the point
and
is
you agree also
what are the
free
priorities?
SHS
Yes.
is embraced by everybody.
I agree, but I'm saying that
so
it is
if
not
we can
far-reaching
take bits
enough.
and pieces from elsewhere.
No, we are looking
and
at
put
a
into
manifesto
that-
promise. We are looking at a manifesto promise. In that manifesto promise is that in fact, as recently as 2 weeks ago at Ekwapim, the president said every child will go to school for free. A week later, the language changes. And we are saying that that is not what we expect. Look, what is the educational budget? The capex for education today, 254 million. Okay, children are going to have free education in the end. I can assure you that first years, you are going to get expanded numbers. So you're going to need more infrastructure. But we are rather downsizing infrastructure to education. Secondary school infrastructure must be expanded. You have to expand tertiary education infrastructure because when they exit at the secondary school, they must find places. And we are rather cutting it down. So I'm just saying that there is a lot in this budget that when you want to reconcile, you struggle to understand where we are. And
there's a lot more that we'll look at. Let me take Dr. Osesibe and then maybe a brief reaction from Kuku Kwarteng, and then we'll take a break. And when we return, we'll zoom in on the taxes that have been either abolished or reduced and the implications, the purposes and the implications. Yes, Doc.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this budget, it was a good budget. I mean, you could clearly see that a lot of thinking has gone into putting together the budget that was read by Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta. Initially, many people thought that many of the promises, one village, one dam, one district, one factory, and all that wasn't going to be possible because of the precarious financial situation that the country found itself. But because of the thinking and making sure that even if the resources available are small, you could still come up with something that would at least give some kind of indication that it is possible to do. And so for me, I think by and large, it is a good budget. The issue, let me try to pick the issue one by one. First and foremost with the issue of nominal growth and the fact that we are only going to grow by just about 20 million or billion more. You're talking about nominal, whereas the growth rate is on the real, okay? And if you look at the inflation projection for the year, it's at about 12 point something.
12%, yeah.
12%, so which immediately reduces the deflator. Okay, so once the deflator, which is the denominator, reduces and the nominal even increases by a certain amount, you're definitely going to get a higher growth rate in that sense. So that is the dynamics that is playing out here. Because the deflator, the GDP deflator would reduce as a result of inflation projection being lower than what was expected last year, definitely you're going to get the real GDP increasing by 6.4%. So that is about that.
But can you explain that inflation also dropped all the way from 2016, and yet the projection wasn't achieved in terms of growth rate, even though we exceeded the nominal. We exceeded the nominal by 20 billion. That's the point.
But the average was not that small.
No,
even though by the end it had reduced. No. But on the average,
no. I'm saying, you see, you need to explain that. Yeah. Because what I'm trying to explain to you is that you have a certain inflation.
You're right.
That dropped by almost 3 percentage points.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
You exceeded your nominal by over 20 billion.
Yeah.
And yet, even your projected rate, you didn't achieve it. And yet, we can't find any spectacular non-performance of a sector to create that. So I'm just saying that it is difficult to align the two. What I'm trying to say is that the growth rate for 2016 is understated. And it is shown by the growth rate calculations for 2017. That is a cue.
Well,
thank you.
Well, so we can go deeper into that.
Yeah, exactly.
But so on the issue of how this budget will finance the numerous initiatives that have been outlined, it's not going to be easy. Of course, there's clear allocation that have been made in the budget, particularly with respect to the various initiatives, the IPEP, that's the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication in the rural areas. And that is going to actually use the $1 million Ghana cedis, $1 million to each constituency is going to be disbursed across the various initiatives. For me, that was very brilliant because all of us were thinking how would the various Zongo Development Fund, we're talking about the small business funds and all of that, where would the money going to come from? Besides the $1 million to a constituency. And so it was very good thinking for them to say that, okay, this $1 million to a constituency, it is up to the constituency to decide which of these is their priority. Okay, so once you get the 1 million, then a section go into development, Zongo Development Fund, a section go into the one district, one factory. The section go into small business, a startup, and all of that. Of course, you can talk about the adequacy of this amount,
right?
You know, because if you just take in about 400 million to set up businesses, small and medium-scale businesses, it is very unrealistic.
Okay.
You know, but you need to look at what is the purpose of it. Is it really going to be the startup capital, or is just going to prepare the grounds, as you rightly mentioned, and to create that enabling infrastructure, you know, to attract businesses to go. And mind you, this whole promise or project is not time. It doesn't have a time dimension. It's not. We're not saying that they are starting today and end by the end of the year.
All right.
It's going to be an ongoing project where there's going to be funds that will be transferred every year. So you look at even if you look at the 4-year, year, how much will be going into this project?
Okay,
definitely.
So you're telling those who are also saying we can't find this in the budget, we can't find that in the budget to say, no, hold on. The promise is for the tenure.
Yeah,
so
because
if they
no
have
time
brought up a budget for 2017, you haven't seen the budget for 2018,
yeah,
2019.
so you cannot really tell that this is what is going to use.
So we'll take a break right here, but before we do so, a quick opportunity for
yes, on the tax, I wanted to say something.
We'll go to tax. We'll come to tax.
Okay,
yes, we'll come to tax, and particularly where I think you may have some interest in, where the IEA has been doing work and talking about the need for a fiscal policy council, and now we have one, according to the budget statement. So is the NDC and I don't know not right when they suggest that this is deception, because you are not doing anything new. You are just going here, taking a bit of that money, you know, putting it into another basket, sort of doing some collections, and then to use that to do the projects.
I'll deal with that. But when I listen to the NDC and I listen to my good friend, it's one very much of eating bad food for a long time. When they place delicious food before you, it doesn't taste good in your mouth. Look, first, I'll respond to Doc briefly. Doc says yes, he sees the realignment and he was hoping that we'll do more capital expenditure. But perhaps because of campaign promises, not at all. You see, we have been engaging very much with industry, look, and what we discovered was, yes, they want the infrastructure, but they felt they had more immediate concerns that they wish would be addressed first. They expressed concern about the DUMSO, that if government had money, they would rather government fix DUMSO rather than provide them with another segment of road. And then the taxes, they said that operational costs too high. Then they also said government interest rates are too high. So yes, we recognize that investing in infrastructure would ultimately promote business. But we are dealing with the immediate problems first. So that's why this budget immediately seeks to signal to industry and business that look, this is a government that want to be friends with you. So come, let's go. That is why you're seeing that's why we are doing the tax cuts, even if in the end it does not allow us to do the kind of investments we can do into capital. So that will come, it will definitely come. And then on this free SHS, progressive, you say what we are doing is progressive. So we are saying that for this first academic year, all first years get taken care of, free SHS. The following year, those first years will be in second year, the second years would get it. And then, so in 3 years. So when this is, if at all I won't take it away from you if you want to call it, this is progressive.
No, if there's another name.
I'm coming. I won't take it from you if that makes you feel good. That's okay.
No.
That's okay. Look, this free SHS idea became very loud in 2008. It was probably most loud in the 2012 elections. In 2008, there was no consensus. In 2012, we achieved consensus because everybody seemed to be saying that this is good, we will do it. If we had done this kind of progressive, where first year, second year, third year, we are done. If we had done that, we will not be having this discussion.
You want an answer?
So I'm saying that the progressive that you spoke about, if that is what we had been doing in the past, we would not have had to spend money doing this. So yes, that is what we would do. We would have loved to roll it out for everybody. But when you're managing an economy, you must know how to manage your resource outflows. You don't want to collapse the economy. So we take one step after the other. We are happy people are at least can see the commitment and are applauding us. Lastly, the realignment. Something quickly. You see, in the 2010 budget statement, why it has become necessary to realign. That's what the NDC government said. Statutory funds introduce extreme inflexibility in the management of the budget, giving no room for policy maneuver. Given the important social interventions that need to be scaled up and or implemented, some key government programs will have to be offloaded from the core budget to statutory funds in order to create space for the utilization of discretionary expenditure in other priority areas. There are several references, but I'll jump quickly to 2016. This the same government, 2016 budget statement. It says, to address the increasing rigidities in the budget that limits the room for policy maneuver, government announced a policy of aligning statutory and internally generated funds to national fiscal goals in the 2014 budget. Consequently, in 2016, statutory fund expenditures totaling 264 million Ghana cedis will be realigned to central government budget. So what did this was presented by Mr. Tepe on behalf of President Mama. Now what he was saying was that the resources that should go into doing some of the priorities emerging out of people's needs, these monies are locked there. That is the language of the outgoing government. We agree with you. The difference is that in spite of that, we did very little. What we have decided to do is to do the capping. But the good news is that in spite of the capping, if you go and see the actual transfers to these statutory funds, and Honorable try that and see, do the actual transfers, because there are standing arrears. Do the actual transfers in 2016 and see and take them as a percentage of government revenue, and you will see that they don't even come up to the cap we are giving. So it tells you that you probably sometimes will have to be honest and say that these rigidities are unhelpful, and if something you've been crying about, we're doing it now, I think you should applaud us. Finally, and just on this same point, the money we are cutting, we are not cutting money from education and taking it elsewhere. In fact, if you take the total education budget, all this free SHS is going up.
How much?
Oh, I can give you the figures
Quote
later.
for me.
But where we're
How
taking
much?
the money from, we are capping.
It went about 7%.
We are capping.
That's how much in value?
8 billion.
Oh, I can give you the
that's-
figures. Even when I finish speaking, please
Okay,
let me
okay, you
conclude
finish.
so that when we go on break,
no,
I'll
I'll
give
come
you
to
the
that. Let
figures.
him finish.
What I'm saying is that the capping, we are now, you see GIPC, when they were doing
not
the
about
presidential
free
diaries, the
not
presidential
about
diaries,
free SHS.
GIPC donated about 500,000 or 1 million Ghana cedis to buy one page in a presidential diary that printed 2,000 copies. GRA did something similar, about 1.5 million. We have capped IGF. Is that the intention we have? That if you have all this money sitting in your MDAs and you can use it to finance presidential diaries, we will cap it and then it will free money so that we can do our free SHS and give
Interesting.
our
That would be a nice point.
Because really, for me,
He's quoted
the time has
copiously
come
from
that
our
some of
budget.
the
Can I have an
municipalities-
opportunity to respond to what he's just
We
done?
have to
Because
win them off.
he's quoted
We
copiously.
really have to win some of the municipality off from
the
that. list.
MDAs,
Okay.
they should listen to me.
Yeah.
The MDAs,
Okay.
the MDAs, the
You-
way you, look, give me opportunity to
Yeah.
communicate with our MDAs.
Yeah.
The way you have been doing business down there and internally generated funds come and you can do all kinds of things under this government, it won't happen.
Okay, thank you.
Can I respond to
let's
the
go,
copious,
let's go to the break and come.
quotes
This
that
show
he's
is brought to
quoting
you
from
by
our budget?
Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, welcome to the new world. ACAP Compost Fertilizer, truly natural. And Breeze, that's an innovative product of WebSoft Solutions. We'll take a break here. We will be right back.